Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh, Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting each episode by saying thank you. I feel so blessed with this podcast. Just my objective when I started was to simplify spirituality and guide people on their journey. The messages I get and the calls I have on a weekly basis just really lifts my soul, lifts my heart. So thank you for everyone that's supported. Thank you for everyone that regularly listens and waits and messages and lets us know, gives us feedback. And if this is the first time you're listening, welcome. I am an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, a spiritual coach and mentor, and as well as a podcast host and podcast creator. I love what I get to do. I get to guide people on their spiritual journey. I get to guide people to truly be their authentic selves, removing the layers and shining their beautiful light. I spent many years in the corporate world, and it kind of guided me. It helped me at the time, but it kind of guided me to that's not who I am or what I'm here to do. So I love the fact I'm doing what I'm here, what I'm meant to do, and the impact I'm having. I just love it. So thank you. This podcast wouldn't be where it is today without my beautiful co-host introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire and published author, Stacey Brown. Stacey, now I've got to do it.
Hi, everybody. So good to be back. Thank you for being so dedicated and listening to this podcast on a regular basis. We wouldn't be where we are right now without you, our listeners. So thank you so much. My name is Stacey. I'm an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader and a spiritual coach and mentor. And I recently published my first book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender. It's available on Amazon and Audible. I'm really looking forward to this episode today and pouring into you, our listeners, and seeing what comes up.
Thank you, Stace. And yeah, this is every episode special, but this episode feels extra special. I was just talking to Stacey the other day about how just this week I released the 250th episode for this podcast, which to me sounds crazy. When I started the podcast, maybe doing one episode a month, and now doing at least 2 episodes a week. It just, it's grown. I really feel like it's guided. So we thought, let's do something to kind of commemorate, celebrate 250 episodes. It's definitely been a journey. It's definitely kind of helped me on my journey. I reflect quite often about the journey of this podcast and kind of where I was 4.5 years ago compared to where I am now. And this podcast has definitely been a big part of my journey. So yeah, it's 250 episodes. I'll take you through how it began and kind of the history of it. And, maybe if you're thinking about starting something, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, maybe this episode will inspire you to do that. Before I get into the background and kind of the history of the podcast and give you some context as to how we got here, which I feel is important, I'd love to ask Stace. Stace, how do you feel about, I know you joined from episode 17 and you've been co-host pretty much since then, releasing one episode a week. How do you feel about, the fact we've now released over 250 episodes?
My mind is blown. I can't believe that we've done what we have with this podcast. And I think it truly says something about our commitment to our audience, that we're consistently releasing episodes. I feel like it has stretched me and grown me in so many ways and has allowed me a space to process some of the deeper parts of life. So I feel inspired. I feel excited by the fact that we've gone this far. And I wonder what it will look like to have another 250 episodes under our belt and where we'll be. I'm excited by it. And I feel truly inspired to be in this space with you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being on this journey with me. It's just, if I take people back to when I started, I actually launched the first episode in October 2020. So not quite 5 years. I'd been working with my spiritual mentor, my teacher, Sidra Jeffrey, who I'd known, and at that point, 8 years, and I'd been going on courses and doing a one-to-one, and for quite a few years. But for the last few years, we'd been working even closer together in terms of doing events and supporting her in Mexico, Hawaii, India. It sounds very glamorous, but it was really deep healing. And it was interesting. I thought I was doing all the work and being at the forefront, showing up. And just in March 2020, where, yes, it was just lockdown was just about to hit, but I still had this vision of me and Sidra with others really raising the consciousness of this planet. But she passed away in a fire in March 2020. And she always talked about not being here, and I can definitely talk about Sidra more in another episode, but she always talked about not being here, and she always talked about all of us being on stage together in Vegas in 2023. I never really understood it, but she always talked about her not being on stage, the rest of us being on stage, and I never grasped it, and until later on. And then when she left this realm in March 2020, she passed away in a fire, aged only 38 years old. And it's really interesting. A lot of people around her that was close to her really crashed because we were all kind of, in some ways, relying on her for our destiny. But there was something inside me that helped me to understand I was exactly where I was meant to be. And in some way, I felt like she'd prepared me because she talked a lot about not being here. She talked a lot about, being somewhere else. And actually, the last 6 months leading up to her leaving this realm, I didn't see her much. I didn't talk to her much for various reasons. I was supposed to go to the final Soul Spa in India. I couldn't make it in the end because of other commitments. But I feel like the universe was preparing me for her to not be here physically. So she became one of my spiritual guides. And she's the one that pushed me to learn how to read Akashic Records. And Akashic Records has become such a big part of what we do. The record of what your soul's been through. But it's through that experience. I learned to read the records because I wanted to understand my connection with Sidra. Such a beautiful process. I've now read for thousands. It started and opened the doors for me in such a big way. But also through the records, I got the message that my voice is my gift and I need to use it. And I get told so often about, how my voice kind of carries its tones and the healing modalities. And, Sidra told me that. And through that message, I decided that I need to start a podcast. And I was thinking of the name, and in the end, I wanted to really honor Sidra. Her initials are SJ, Sidra Jeffrey. So I named the podcast after her spiritual journey. And her book was called The Awakening. So she was all about the awakening. So the name of the podcast honors her. I feel like she still guides it in the background. In all honesty, at the beginning, I was debating, do I have the right mic? Do I have this software? And, I need to do all this research. And, but when Sidra left this realm, there was a part of me that knew that I was playing safe. And that kind of knew that I needed to be seen, be heard. So then in the end, I just started the podcast. I sat with some AirPods on in front of my MacBook and just recorded the first episode. At the beginning, it was like a passion project. I'd do one episode a month, kind of really in the back of my mind thinking, who's actually going to be listen to this anyway, right? So I'm just, maybe that was kind of helped me, but that's how it started. And really my intention when I channeled what I wanted was to simplify spirituality and guide people on their spiritual journey. I've always known that I have access to deep spiritual knowledge, which is not mine. And I wanted to share that because I know it's not mine. I'm meant to share it. And the podcast gave me that platform to share whatever's come through me. And I'm blessed with the messages I get on a weekly basis, and there's some people that I spoke to someone this week who's gone back to the beginning of the podcast to listen from the beginning to really experience the journey of how things. And that period 4.5 years ago, I was a very different person. I'd not even met Stacey yet. I was kind of trying to figure out my journey, because I always thought, I was whatever I did, it was going to be spiritually, it was going to be with Sidra. So, and it still is. She watches over me whenever I open Akashic Records. Actually, even when we record an episode, I feel her energy. I feel her there. So she's just not there in the way I expected, and that's okay. But it blows my mind how far this podcast has come and how different I am compared to 4.5 years ago. I am, showing up in all ways from a healing journey perspective. And it's actually even interesting. Recently, I released an episode about coming out of the cocoon, because personally, I felt that I've actually been in a bit of a cocoon, and I'm starting to come out of that. So it's interesting, the personal journey, but I know that this podcast has been my training ground. It's been my journey to share what I've been going through. It's been my platform to share any knowledge I have. And it really has been led. And I feel like in some ways, Sidra guided Stacey to me, to be the co-host, to be business partner in so much that we do. I met Stacey on Clubhouse, and Clubhouse came through at a similar time. I think I started on Clubhouse in April 2020. But again, Clubhouse is a social audio app, and it gave me a platform to speak. And again, it was a great training ground to speak. And I just, without knowing it, the podcast, Clubhouse, was all part of my training. It was all part of my journey to truly shine my light. And it's only now, and I'm sitting here thinking about 250 episodes and the journey of it. And, at the beginning, I was so nervous about releasing every episode, and, should I edit it? And actually, very early on, I made the decision that whatever comes through, comes through. I don't want to. There was a part of me that didn't want to spend time editing. I actually, ironically, don't like listening to my own voice. But I just felt that the rawness of the podcast was important. So the intentions was set very at the beginning. The approach, again, was set at the very beginning. But it's led to so much, right? It's led to me leaving the corporate world, me doing what I love to do. And it has, I look at Stacey and how much she shares and how vulnerable she is in her shares. And I wonder if I'm vulnerable enough, but there's nothing about me I don't want to share. I feel like I'm an open book, but I do feel Stacey's vulnerability is one of her superpowers. So it's been a really interesting journey. I kind of digressed a little bit, but I'm going to hand over to Stacey to talk about her experience and kind of in a second. But before we go there, I want you to consider this time. If you listen to this podcast, you listen to it for a reason. I feel like we're all being pushed to shine our light, to use our voice. So my question to you, dear listener, is how are you going to shine your light? What are you going to do? I'm sure we'll ask more questions as we get through this episode, but it just comes to me that if you listen to this, maybe you're ready to start a podcast. Maybe you're ready to start sharing more about you on social media. Maybe you're ready to show up. My deal with God and my guides is I'm going to keep showing up every day in whatever way they ask me to. Maybe that's what you've got to do. But as we talk more about this podcast and the journey, and when Stacey joined from episode 17, if I remember correctly, we'd already started to work closely together. We just met on Clubhouse, and we kind of clicked. I heard her while I was driving, just talking so vulnerably and so from the heart, and I felt like I had to go on stage. And Clubhouse, when you go on stage, it means you can have a conversation with anyone that's hosting the room. And I just felt like I needed to go up and just say, well done, because that level of authenticity I didn't really see very often. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit. So that's when I went on stage and just said, Stace, I'm sure I called her Stacey at the time, but well done for being so vulnerable. And that kind of started a journey where we built a business together, and she's been a co-host on this podcast for, I don't remember when the first episode was, but probably, must be at least 4 years, I would have thought. But yeah, Stacey, tell us about the beginning for you, how things started, and kind of the journey with this podcast. Anything you want to share? Over to you.
It's crazy because I've always been extremely self-conscious of my voice. And so the idea of being on a podcast just kind of, even now, still blows my mind. But when you invited me to be a guest on the podcast, it was to share my story. And I had not done that very much at that point. I had shared, a little bit on Clubhouse and kind of started exposing myself a little bit to being public about my journey. But I feel like I really ripped the Band-Aid off on episode 17 when I joined, talking about my spiritual journey and the path that I was led on through a very traumatic experience with my son. And it led me on a journey of self-discovery. I feel like with every episode, there is the challenge to dial in on what you know to be true and to convey that message to the audience. And so this has been such a powerful process for me to get to a space where I'm speaking publicly about my spirituality. I'm speaking publicly about my gifts and abilities and really doing what I can to serve the public. And it's interesting because when we started, we had a bunch of different avenues for how to reach clients and what to do. And slowly things have kind of fallen away as we've gotten through the pandemic and Clubhouse has kind of died down. The one thing that has stayed consistent is this podcast and us showing up on a consistent basis and talking about different aspects of spirituality and the spiritual journey. So for me, I feel like this podcast has stretched me and grown me in ways that I never could have expected. I feel like I understand more about my values and beliefs than ever before because I'm talking about them on a consistent basis. And the connection with our audience has also been very powerful to hear people's feedback about what we're doing, how we're doing it, how we're showing up, and that we're inspiring people on their own healing journey has been such a blessing. And oftentimes when we're recording, I don't think about who we're reaching. We just have a conversation based off of whatever topic we're covering. And it's just the two of us. And I just think about it like it's the two of us. And then we'll get messages the following week from people who have been inspired or have been touched by the episode or feeling some type of way. And I realize, oh my gosh, like people are really listening to this and resonating with it. And there's so much power in that. And it's such a blessing to see that we're having an impact. I've been through so much in my life. I've made some challenging decisions. I have faced, near-death experiences and so much pain and heartache. And to be able to have a place where I can talk about all of the journey and inspire people on their own healing journey makes all of the lessons and the pain and the heartbreak, it makes it all worth it because I know that my story is not in vain. I know that I'm helping somebody else, and that's the payoff. That's what gives me excitement and passion, is knowing that there are people who are listening that are gaining something from this experience because of what we're putting out there does so much for me.
I love that, and it's just it's an interesting point, about this podcast being our training ground, because if I feel the intuitive journey and how intuitive led this podcast has been, and like I said earlier, I feel like Sidra has been guiding it, but the intuition, we don't script anything, we don't, whatever comes through, and that's got to be a beautiful way of building on that ability. And so again, for our listeners, if you're thinking about doing something, don't overthink it, don't overplan it, don't, because sometimes, and I feel like the energy we're in right now, we've got to let our guides take over. And I really do feel like with this podcast, that's what we've done. And it's like, it has been my training ground. It has been, even recording meditations, and maybe it doesn't come across, but there is sometimes nervousness, right? I get the anxiety that Stacey sometimes feels about being on stage, and it's probably different to what I feel, but how supported I have been by my guides and Sidra and all the energies around me, I do want to say thank you. Just being guided, being able to channel. I look at the numbers of this podcast, and I'm not really a numbers. It is, my objective is always to share whatever knowledge I have and to get to that one person. But nearly will be 100,000 unique listeners in the next week or so. That just blows my mind. Like I don't even know what the latest numbers are, but 215,000 downloads or something. I'm not even sure. Maybe it's higher. But that just blows my mind. But honestly, if I thought about the numbers too much, I don't think that would change my approach. Actually, to be fair, I just, in very many of the episodes, I'm not really there present as a human. I really feel like I'm being channeling, supporting, and I look at the podcast today. We decided to release 2 episodes a week. I felt that an episode a week with Stacey, continuing to kind of the approach that people resonate with. But I wanted to expand the reach, and I also wanted to get different perspectives. So we started adding more guests, and now I have, I release an episode once a week with a guest, or actually I've started to do some solo ones too, but it's just about trying different things. So I guess at this point, if anyone has a suggestion, anything we should do differently, or a guest or a topic, please do reach out. Let us know. Send us a DM. We love receiving that feedback. And also let us know, what are you going to start? I'm hoping this episode, as we're recording it, maybe inspires you to start a podcast. Because even if I look at the technology development and how things have shifted over the 4 years, when I started 4 years ago, like I said, I'll just sit with AirPods on and record. We were using Zoom. We've now changed, and not advertising, and not sponsored by them, but I use Riverside. I try and make the process of loading the podcast as streamlined as possible, because I want to focus on the message and recording the podcast rather than kind of all the bits that go with it. So I'm always looking for things to streamline. So if you're looking to start a podcast, I would recommend using Riverside. I use a platform called Captivate FM to load onto all platforms in one go. YouTube is the only one that I have to do separately. Use things like Opus Clips for creating clips on social media. Anything you can do to streamline the process, I would do. And editing, again, it depends on your objective. If you feel like you need to edit, then again, Riverside is a really good editor. I want anything that comes through to come through naturally. I do use Riverside to get rid of the ums and the ahs, but everything else is natural. So I went off at a tangent there, but it really is, whatever platform you pick and whatever thing you do to pick to shine your light, using your voice, sharing your light, it's really important. and trusting that voice from within, and, learning to trust it, and learning to, and if you're going to record a podcast, just sit and record. Don't overthink it. Whatever comes through, comes through. And, at the beginning, maybe it's a bit raw, but who cares? And the next thing, and I'm going to hand over to Stacey in a second, talk about it, but speaking your truth, it's really interesting for me. I love to share everything about whatever I've been through, and sometimes I'm like, oh, my story is not as powerful as someone else's or whatever, but I think that's just the story. My journey. Growing up, I was 3 years old, and I was a refugee in the UK with a family of 9, 4 brothers, 4 sisters, one younger sister, everyone else an older. I didn't have a voice. And it's ironic that my voice is my gift now. So, at 3 years old, I didn't know the language. Everybody was busy trying to figure out their own way of existence. And I know that I didn't really have a voice. I never spoke. So, and now I use my voice, and my voice is my gift. So the reason I'm telling you that is your story is important. Whatever you've been through is unique to you, but it doesn't mean that your suffering is any less or more important than anyone else. It doesn't mean that, you sharing your story might inspire one person to change their life. And maybe that's enough. But being vulnerable and speaking your truth publicly and using a platform to do that is really, really important. And I'm going to hand over to Stacey about talking about vulnerability, because I know I share vulnerable. I know I share whatever's in my heart. But honestly, I feel like one of Stacey's superpowers is her vulnerability. She's been through so much, as she said earlier. But when she shares, she takes us on a journey of feeling like we've been there. And I never felt like it's about her sharing her trauma. I've always felt like it's about her sharing a journey of how she's grown through her trauma, which is why I feel it's so inspirational. So, Stacey, I'd love for you to talk about your journey of sharing vulnerability, vulnerably, and kind of how that feels to you, because I know you go through a journey. So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a process, right? Because when I speak publicly, there is no filter. I don't think through what I'm going to say and what I'm not going to say, and how's this going to look, and how are people going to perceive it. I don't think about any of that. I just share from the heart whatever comes through. And there have been so many episodes on this podcast where I have gotten emotional sharing the different things that I've been through and the lessons that I've learned through the process. And it's been challenging because after the fact, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just shared that. But when I'm sharing it, I'm like, hopefully this can help somebody on their healing journey. And I've just been true to the story and true to the topic of whatever we're talking about. I can't imagine if this podcast was filtered and didn't have the raw vulnerability that it does. I think it would really take something away from the experience for the listener. But I assure you, I don't do it intentionally. It's just something that happens. And it's when everything happened with my son, it's like the filter that I used to live by was gone. And what was left in its place was just this authentic, vulnerable, heart wide open space that I speak from. And sometimes when I'm done recording, I kind of have my head in my hands thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just shared that. Or, wondering how it's going to be perceived. But it's amazing because in those episodes where I feel the most self-conscious or the most uncomfortable, I think those are the ones that we get the most feedback about and have the most impact, because I am sharing from the heart and there is no filter and people feel that. And so I am committed to staying in that space I'm going through a lot of transition right now, significant transition, and I'm scared and I'm nervous. And I've been documenting that part of the journey here as well as I embark on the decision to move to the UK and getting a visa. I mean, there's just so much happening in my world right now that I feel I can bring to the podcast and hopefully inspire people on their journey. I just my deepest desire is to stay true to myself through this process. And I know that by staying true to myself, I'm staying true to the listener.
I love that. So powerful. Sharing from the heart, being true to yourself. Yeah. And like I said, Stacey, I always felt that your vulnerability is one of your superpowers. I know we've had this conversation many a time, but, and like I said, for me, it's interesting. I naturally channel to a level where I feel like I have this knowledge and I always share. And it's not, I feel like I share who I am, but I don't hold back. But at the same time, when I get into channel mode and I'm kind of sharing whatever knowledge, wherever it comes from, it does take over a little bit. So it's just interesting seeing how I've shifted and how I've evolved over time. Yeah, and just then when you move on to, and I think about the guests that we've had and the timing of the guests, and I always feel like there's, when I have a conversation with a guest, it's what I need to, and it's like divinely led. And I think about some of our clients, how they started out as clients, and now some of them are guests because they've gone to that space where they've done so much healing, they have so much to share. And it's just beautiful to see that, the journey of somebody finding us on the podcast, becoming a client, and then going on a journey, and then the podcast that they used and they kind of found to find us is then a vehicle for them to share and speak their truth. I just think that's so beautiful. It's like whenever I think about how much our how much our clients have grown, and even using the podcast as a platform to share their voice, their powerful voice it's so beautiful. And all the guests, I just have to thank you for always showing up. It's just I am probably a little too protective over this podcast. I'm selective about the guests that we invite on. I'll always talk to a guest before they come on as a guest, just as a pre-conversation. But I still feel that any guest is guided. And I guess if I was to pick an episode that I remember, Ashley from A Line Within was the podcast I found in March 2020 when I was looking for a podcast around Akashic Records. And it was her online course that kind of began the process for me to learn how to read Akashic Records. And I've now read for thousands. And, her podcast at the time was so inspirational. And, going full circle and her coming on this podcast, again, it was like, felt so surreal to me because obviously it was a different version of me. But again, it came full circle, and she was a guest on this podcast. And I remember when I was just talking to her, I'm like, well, when I DM'd you, she came back within seconds, and she's like, well, I just knew when I got your message that I was meant to be on your podcast. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And even now, when I just had a call just before recording this, and sometimes when we talk to new clients and discovery call and the rest of it, sometimes there's that starstruck energy. It's that kind of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to somebody that I've been listening to me for so long, and that even somebody being starstruck by my energy is just it's crazy. But I humbly know and accept that my voice does make a difference. I don't think I've ever said that publicly, Stacey, but anyway, but accepting that, the voice I've been given isn't mine and is somehow has healing tones and is meant to be heard. So, but the other thing is, as Stacey was saying, the role of consistency, always showing up, releasing an episode every week, and now releasing an episode every 2 weeks. If I make sure that I release an episode every Monday, and actually there was a week couple of weeks ago where I didn't release an episode on Thursday because I released an episode on Tuesday, the monthly Akashic message. So I was like, well, do I want to release the third one? And I kind of decided not to for whatever reason, but it felt weird not releasing a Thursday episode. And just recently, the thing I've added just to kind of share is I've started to do more solo episodes. And I resisted that. And it's kind of an interesting journey of, is anyone going to want to listen to just me? It's better if we have two people, we can banter off each other. But actually, thank you for all the feedback I got on those individual episodes. I got more feedback on those episodes than the other recent ones. And, I got lots of messages about doing more solo episodes. So, thank you for that. I definitely plan to do more of those. I mean, I have the monthly Akashic message. I'll probably do at least one other episode a month on my own. But yeah, let us know what works for you. What, if you've been listening to this podcast, what what is it that you love about it? What would you change? I've consciously not looked for sponsors to add adverts and all that sort of stuff. I just want to protect it. Globally, we're in the top 2% of all podcasts, so we're definitely in that bracket if we wanted to, but I chose not to. I don't actually, me and Stacey have a lot of beautiful products that we do, spiritual mentorship, Akashic record reading, and the rest of it. And we don't talk too much about that either, and maybe we should talk more. But we love what we get to do, and I feel very, very blessed with this podcast. I'd love to ask Stacey, is there an episode, Stacey, that kind of you remember doing, or that kind of really had the biggest impact to you? I mean, you've done so many. Like, I remember for me when you read a chapter of your book, and I was a big part of the process of getting the book. So, but just you sharing that chapter and taking us on a journey, and our 100th episode celebration, and having some of our clients on, and just there's been so many. But I'd love to hear from you as to what's your biggest memories, and maybe if there's an episode or two that you remember, I'd love to hear about it.
I mean, I think what really jumps out at me is the beginning and starting to use my voice and talking publicly on this platform about what I've been through in my life was really significant for me. I've talked on this podcast about the dynamic between my father and I, and kind of the toxic dynamic of that relationship. And I've never talked about that publicly before. So some of those things stand out for me in, sharing the book and the journey. Sharing my story feels very powerful to me because it was so open and raw and so vulnerable in sharing some of the pain that I've been through. That absolutely stands out to me. I think the 100th episode where we had, clients and previous guests on was really powerful as well. And I remember being so excited that we hit 100 episodes, and here we are at over 250. It's kind of crazy. But those are some of the things that stand out to me. We've had some powerful guests who have joined the podcast and shared their journey authentically, and that's been really interesting as well. But I definitely feel in the beginning, not having a whole lot of experience with recording podcasts and not really sharing my voice publicly before on a platform like this, I would say is what stands out to me the most, because it took some real bravery to agree to do this and to stand by it and to allow myself the space to publicly say things that I've never said before. I mean, there are so many things that I've shared in this space that you would share with like a close friend. You might have a deep conversation one-to-one over a cup of coffee. And here I have shared it publicly for the world. So it's like, I absolutely feel the power of that. And that stands out to me the most. The fact that all of these listeners have been able to tap into my story and my journey, to the vulnerability, to the real and rawness of it, just blows my mind. And I think the icing on the cake for me is when we hear from listeners. And when our listeners take the time to write us an email saying what impact we've had on them, that for me is like really powerful, because we have so many listeners. And I know so many of you, you listen to the podcast, you wait for the episodes to come out. The feedback is really powerful, but getting like an individual message saying like, thank you for your vulnerability, or thank you for sharing that story, or I really resonated with it. That for me is like the payoff, right? Like, it's exciting to see that people are actually listening. Because I go back to the same thing. When we're having a conversation, I just think of it as you and me. I don't think about all the people who are going to listen to it. If I did, it would freak me out. But then you get the messages from people after the fact. And it's so powerful to see that people are resonating with what we're sharing. We are getting people to think a little bit deeper about their spirituality and their connection, maybe tweaking their routine, trying new things. I mean, that's where I really get excited. But I would say, as far as what stands out to me, it's the power of being open to share the journey.
That's so powerful. And, I remember so many episodes where we finished and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I cried on that episode. I can't believe I was so vulnerable again. And it just, I love it. There's one thing we haven't spoken about this journey of this podcast. And, Stacey, I'm going to put you on the spot and it'd be kind of boring otherwise, but this podcast has also guided you to someone in your world. I remember somebody booking a discovery call a couple of years ago. You just happened to be in the UK and I was talking to him on the phone and I was like, well, you have a choice of working with me or you have me and Stacey, and he'd heard you on the podcast. And interesting enough, when he was looking for a podcast, he was looking for a spiritual podcast that was not American. So he was looking for a British voice, I guess. It wasn't nothing against Americans, but he wanted to, kind of find that voice that he resonated with. And ironically, he found a podcast which, sure, they had a British host, but also an American co-host. So just kind of, it's interesting that he found, but yeah, and I had a discovery call with him, and you just happened to be here, so you came and said hello. That led to us working with him as a client, and over time, that relationship has led to more, and it's just makes me smile how this podcast has also changed your life in that way, Stace. And I'm going to hand over to you to kind of talk more about that story.
Yeah, it's so crazy. I feel like this story makes me nervous to tell because it's like we crossed a line of professionalism. But I just want to be clear in saying like that didn't happen like for quite some time. But yes, Barney was a client who was listening to the podcast and was captivated by the fact that there was somebody British hosting the podcast. And then, we met and we started working together, and we worked together professionally for months with Barney. And we did an individual mentorship program with him. And then we did a group mentorship program that he joined that as well. And then on one of my visits to the UK, we met in person and got to connect with him. And that was really cool. And then fast forward, we kept in touch, and over time, something blossomed there. And now we're in this committed relationship that we've been in for just about 2 years. I guess when this episode comes out, it'll be 2 years. So it's been a really unique way that the podcast has impacted my life. It's hard to believe that I met somebody in the way that I did, but it happened, and it has been a really powerful journey to see how things have unfolded between he and I.
Stacey, you know it's an art form for me to put you on the spot. So, thank you for, again, being so vulnerable. And in Stacey's defense, like I said, she was already saying he stopped being a client for a while. And actually, we were having an event in the UK and we invited him along as a friend, just to kind of, Stacey was in the UK and, just thought, well, we were doing the Mind, Body, Spirit event in the UK, which is the biggest event in the UK. And we just said, why don't you come along? So that's kind of where we reconnected in person and where him and Stacey, kind of. So, yeah, it was felt like a very guided but innocent journey, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, who knows, right? When you're open to magic, magic happens. And it just shows the magic of this journey, this magic of this podcast. I feel so very blessed. Like I said, I just had a discovery call just before we started recording. And, the person said how starstruck she was and how, she wasn't even sure I was going to show up. That's sort of, it's just interesting. I don't see myself as a star, but I know the human signs recently are showing up that, the podcast is reaching people. I shared a couple of weeks ago a story where, me and Stacey have a monthly Zoom call. I've always imagined that most of the people that listen are in the US, and the numbers suggest that over 50% are from the US. So we have this monthly Zoom call, which is like a 90-minute healing session. Is free. We open the group Akashic Records. I'm sure if you're a regular listener, you probably heard that episode. Maybe you even joined the Zoom. And, the day after, I was in my own little bubble, visiting my sister. I was driving back. I thought, I really fancy a milkshake. And there's an ice cream shop near me that I haven't been to for like a year up at that point. And I just walked in and there was like 10 people. It's a small shop, but there's 10 people just sitting there having ice cream. And one of them got up as I was in the queue and he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, hey, I'm good. And he was like, I was on your Zoom healing. It was really good. Thank you. I was like, oh, cool. Thank you, universe. That was really good to meet somebody in person. And then three other members of the group all got up and also said, oh yeah, we were on too. It was really cool. Yeah. They're all taking pictures with me. And I was like, wait, it was such a surreal moment. And, kind of another person got up and said, oh yeah, I see you on social media. And, it's kind of like, I just thought, wow, that was definitely a message from the universe that the podcast is getting to places, and the Zoom healing session that me and Stacey do is definitely getting. I was like, thank you, universe. Then I was talking to one of my clients that I mentor, and she's like, oh yeah, they're all my friends. They're the ones I encourage them to join, listening in. And it's just like, wait, this is such an interesting journey when you connect the dots. It's just, when you allow magic to happen, magic will happen. So I guess if you listen to this podcast and you get to this point, your voice is needed. Your light is needed. How are you going to share your story? How are you going to share what you have in your heart? If you have a story to share and you feel like you want to share on this podcast, reach out. Maybe you're ready to be a guest. Maybe you're ready to start your own podcast. Maybe you're ready to write a book. Maybe you're ready to truly shine your light. This is the time we're all being challenged to be different, to go through the rebirth. And so if you get any message from this podcast is to shine your light. Think about, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, how have you shifted over the last couple? And if you haven't listened to the podcast for a long time, just ask yourself, how have you shifted over the last couple of years? What messages have you integrated? How have you grown spiritually? How have you, and be proud of how much you've shifted. If there's a favorite episode that you remember the most, let us know. If there's a topic or a guest that you want us to have, please let us know. And like I said, are you allowing yourself to be seen? Are you allowing yourself to be guided? Are you allowing yourself to let new vibrations in? And maybe you're looking for a community. Maybe you're ready to be mentored. Maybe if something resonates in what me and Stacey say, maybe you're ready to be guided by us. We love the mentorship program that we do. You can book a free discovery call. We'll take you through it. Maybe you're ready for an Akashic record reading, which is a journey of what your soul's been through. And again, you can do that from either of our websites. We love what we get to do. I love this podcast so much. I'm so protective over it, even though it doesn't need protecting. But I cherish the emails and the messages and all of that, So thank you to everyone that regularly listens and messages and supports. And like I said, if this is the first time, welcome. Hopefully we've touched a part of your soul and maybe you felt the love that we're sending you. But thank you. And Stacey, thank you for your support. This podcast wouldn't be where it is today without your help, your support, your love, your light, and you sharing so vulnerably. So I'm going to hand over to you to share anything, whatever's in your heart. Over to you.
Thank you so much for bringing me on this journey with you. It has been so inspirational, and it has helped me in so many ways to process things that I might not otherwise process. I'm grateful for a space where I get to do that publicly and inspire people on their own healing journey. And I'm really proud of what we've created. I hope that our listeners are inspired today by what they've heard. I hope that we'll get some feedback on upcoming episode ideas. Allow us a space to pour into you by reaching out and letting us know what you want us to talk about. We're open to new ideas all the time. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next 250 episodes. Thanks, Nims.
I love it. And I always forget to if this episode or the podcast resonates, please do like, share, comment. It really does help getting the podcast to more people, and not something I always kind of forget to mention that, because our intention is to reach anyone it's meant to, and you can help by sharing, commenting, liking, letting us know what resonates. And I was going to share, and I forgot to share earlier, but if you want to hear more about Barney's story and his spiritual journey with us, the episode is 182. So take a listen. You can hear more about, Barney's journey. And Stacey recorded that in November 2024. Wow. Seems like lifetimes ago. But yeah, as we close, thank you. I really hope this episode has inspired you to shine your light and to do something differently. And we'd love to hear what that is. So reach out, DM us. Our socials are always in the show notes. Email us. Again, our email's in the show notes. Reach out if you feel that we can guide you and help you. If there's something you want to share, any ideas, please, again, reach out. Sending everyone so much love and light. Hopefully you felt it. Thank you for being here. And Stacey, thank you again for being here. Sending you the biggest hug, sending everybody the biggest hug, and bye for now. We'll be back soon.